extraordinary defeat down to?
The British people decided that it was time for a change. That is a very clear message from tonight's results. All over the country, it would appear at first sight that they looked for the candidate in this constituency that had the best chance of ousting a Conservative. And that's how they voted. And it has been a very good night for the Labour Party. I congratulate Mr. Blair and the Labour Party. I wish them well as they govern.
Well, you almost expect Neil Kinnock to say, "We're all right." Peter Mandelson, who's no mean dancer himself, at the front there. Atmosphere building up as we wait for Tony Blair's arrival. Apologies to Brian Mulwiney, who we lost there in order to come back here. We'll go back to Brian Mulwiney in just a moment, but there are three of the most senior figures in the Labour Party: Neil Kinnock on the left, and John Prescott, the Deputy Leader, soon probably to be Deputy Prime Minister, and Peter Mandelson, the MP for Hartlepool, no post at the moment, the man who reinvented the Labour Party. And behind Peter Mandelson, Pauline Prescott, John Prescott's wife, Robin Cook, between Kinnock and Prescott there. You can sense the feeling of exuberance and relief after the struggle to win this election, after the past 18 years when they've seen the Labour Party go from the disastrous defeats in 1983 and 87, and then the almost success of 92, which ended so badly for them with a apparent last-minute change in the mind of the electorate. And then this time round, when at the beginning of the campaign, all these people who were working for the party were so uncertain and nervous about it and tense lest it go wrong, and one moment in the campaign when they thought perhaps it might start to unscramble, and then to discover not only has it not gone wrong, but it's exceeded their wildest dreams in terms of the kind of majority that Labour's going to get. 183 we're talking about now as the projected majority, and no wonder they're exuberant. Now let's rejoin Brian Mulwiney in Cambridgeshire North West, the chairman of the Conservative Party and the man who was the principal architect of their campaign.
It would appear at first sight that they looked for the candidate in this constituency that had the best chance of ousting a Conservative. And that's how they voted. And it has been a very good night for the Labour Party. I congratulate Mr. Blair and the Labour Party. I wish them well as they govern our country, for all of us want our country well governed. In opposition, we will support them when we think they're acting in the national interest. We'll oppose them with, I hope, rational argument when they are not, in our view. But all of that is for tomorrow. It's very clear that the British people decided that after 18 years, and irrespective of the fact that we've got the best economy, probably for 2 generations, that it was time for a change of government. And one of the strengths of our democracy is that you accept victory and defeat. I hope both with good. People will form a view that this was probably a right judgment. But we will get to all of those issues in due course.
Have you spoken to John Major? Are you urging him to stay on?
I have spoken to. Might or might not see.
Your thoughts this evening for those colleagues who will not be returning to the House of Commons?
Indeed. Representatives of their constituents, some of them over many years. A number of them have served this nation illustriously.
Well, down at Tory party headquarters, Michael Portillo. The Defence Secretary has turned up, having lost his seat. William Hague, Welsh Secretary, one of the people who might well challenge for the leadership and who would have been a rival of Michael Portillo. And there's very prolonged applause for Mr. Portillo, who behaved very graciously at Enfield Southgate. And maybe is going to speak.
Thank you very much. Got consent. We're waiting for the Prime Minister.
Rather brief speech. And apparently, according to William Hague, at any rate, they're waiting for the Prime Minister to come. I don't know whether we're expecting him to come tonight. We think they're both, John Major and Tony Blair, are going
What a night, huh?
to their headquarters, or rather, Tony Blair going to the Festival Hall. So, Tony King, what do you think as you watch these scenes? And we've talked at the very beginning of this programme, the last, probably the last, well, certainly now the last general election of this century, and it goes out on this note. How do you place this election in the sort of post-war years?
Well, it is certainly the most remarkable landslide, though, as I said right at the beginning of the program, I think landslide isn't quite strong enough a word that we've had since the war. How we're going to place this election is going to depend very much on the next few years, because we know very little about how a Labour government is actually going to operate, and we tend to judge elections retrospectively. One thing we can say, by the way, is that turnout is almost certainly going to be the lowest since the war. Brian Mulwiney repeated the point about time for a change. I really think that the Conservatives ought not to comfort themselves in quite that way. Maybe it was time for a change 5 years ago. The core fact is that this government, over time, earned the contempt of the majority of the British people for the way it governed the economy in the first few years, for the sleaze that we've heard about several times tonight, for its disunity over Europe. And it also, I think, caused an awful lot of people to want to wreak revenge on the Conservative Party.
But that makes it, I mean, if that's the correct diagnosis, it makes it very difficult for them to find a way of recovery or getting back, because if it was a matter of resolving your views on a single currency, then it's a political point which you can have a battle about and maybe resolve or maybe not. But if it's about sleaze and incompetence and those kind of things, it's not that easy for them to change.
I think it's going to be very difficult indeed. Not only are they divided, but there are actually no clear lessons to be learned from this experience.
Except to sit around and wait for Labour to make a mistake.
It's almost as bad as that. The one point that I think one ought to add is that the Eurosceptics have been insisting all along that if only the government had adopted a firm, clear Eurosceptical line, the Conservatives would have done better. Well, an awful lot of individual Conservative candidates adopted exactly that line and said in their election addresses that they would oppose a single currency and so on. The results of tonight make it clear that those candidates have done just as badly as non-Eurosceptical candidates. There appear to have been no votes in Euroscepticism at all. We saw Norman Lamont go down, we saw Nick Budgeon go down, we saw Theresa Gorman in terrible trouble.
So, Robin Oakley, where do you think the fault lines are in the Tory party? I mean, if it's not just a matter of Euroscepticism or Europhilia, where are they actually going to, how are they going to sort themselves out?
Well, as you were saying earlier, the problem is that I think sleaze had an awful lot to do with this defeat, in the sense that time for a change was a strong current already playing. It was playing at the last election. It seemed to be enough for the electorate at the last election that they'd changed Margaret Thatcher for John Major, and perhaps they bucked the odds in '92. But sleaze and the way it accumulated through this Parliament fed into the whole idea of a tired old administration whose standards were slipping.
Do you think John Major has any feeling for that? Do you think he'll rue the day that he failed to be tougher from the start? I mean, on David Mellor, way back, when he said he was going to stay and then he was forced to resign, and onwards through the Neil Hamilton affair, all the other people, the people who took cash for questions and didn't lose the Tory whip, all the catalogue of complaints, the 16 ministers or more who left his government. Do you think, looking back, he'll think, well, maybe I should have done it different?
Perhaps in retrospect he will, because it's always been his technique to set up commissions, inquiries, to have things sorted out over a period. Perhaps he should have been quicker and more decisive in tackling it.
Do you think he'll think that?
I think he may well, as he analyses what has gone wrong for the Conservatives over this period, it may well be something that he thinks he could have handled in a different way.
As always at public events down at the Royal Festival Hall, there are false starts. We thought that Tony Blair was arriving, but we haven't been able to see him, but we'll keep an eye on that. And rather like the last night of the proms, any movement on stage, I think, leads to applause. But we'll keep it up there on the screen, and we're also keeping an eye for Smith Square, where John Major is expected to arrive. And the moment either does... Ah, there is the sign of a rather grand motor car arriving, which may well be Tony Blair. I think it is. Already signs of a security operation going on around him. But Tony Blair and Cherie Blair. Tom Sawyer just behind there with Alistair Campbell slapping each other on the back, the General Secretary of the Labour Party, and he goes down through the line of his supporters. And you can see here what a personal triumph this is for Tony Blair, and is going to be treated as a personal triumph for Tony Blair by the party. Everybody said that if he wins, he'll have no problem, because even those who were dubious about the way that he was controlling the party and leading it will give him the credit for the victory if they really win, and they've won so handsomely that the whole party, for the moment, is likely to be bound up in the victory. Kinnock congratulating him, Mrs. Prescott congratulating him, John Prescott there, his deputy leader. New government, and no doubt he may be thinking a new dawn as the sun comes up. Over the South Bank on the River Thames at the Festival Hall, and the man who will tomorrow take on the burdens of office today celebrates his party's victory.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Well,
this is a man who's won the largest Labour majority ever, bigger than 1945 when they had 147 seats. This time it's heading for 183. An astonishing recovery for the party, and a tribute to the single-mindedness with which this man has pursued the aim of making his party acceptable and electable.
A new dawn has broken, has it not? And it is wonderful. We always said that if we had the courage to change, then we could do it, and we did it. And let me say this to you. The British people have put their trust in us. It is a moving and it is a humbling experience. And the size of our likely majority now imposes a special sort of responsibility upon us. We have been elected as New Labour, and we will govern as New Labour. We were elected because as a party today, we represent the whole of this nation. And we will govern for the whole of this nation, every single part of it. We will speak up for that decent, hard-working majority of the British people whose voice has been silent for all too long in our political life. And we'll set about doing the good, practical things that need to be done in this country. Extending educational opportunity, not to an elite, but to all our children. Modernising our welfare state, rebuilding our National Health Service as a proper National Health Service to serve the needs of Britain. We will work with business to create that dynamic and enterprising economy we need, and we will work with all our people for that just and decent society that the British people have wanted for so long. This vote tonight has been a vote for the future, for a new era of politics in Britain, so that we can put behind us the battles of this past century and address the challenges of the new century. It will be a Britain renewed, where through education and technology and enterprise, we equip our country for the future in a different and new economic world, and where we build a nation united, with common purpose, shared values, with no one shut out, no one excluded, no one told that they do not matter. In that society, tolerance and respect will be the order of the day as we watch our children grow in strength and our elderly rest easy and secure in old age. That is the country we have wanted for so long. A Britain whose politics starts once again to live up to the finest ideals of public service. And a Britain that stands tall in the world, whose sense of its future is as certain and confident as its sense of its own history. Today, on the eve of this new millennium, the British people have ushered in this new era of politics. And the great thing about it is that we have won support in this election from all walks of life, from all classes of people, from every single corner of our country. We are now today the People's Party. The party of all the people, the many, not the few. The party that belongs to every part of Britain, no matter what people's background or their creed or their colour. The party that can stand up for what is a great country. And I want everyone to feel proud in their country tonight because they all have a stake in its success. I believe in Britain, and tonight the people of Britain are uniting behind New Labour. They are uniting around basic British values, uniting to put the divisions of the past behind us, uniting to face the challenges of the future, uniting at long last as one nation. 3 days ago, I quoted one of my predecessors, John Smith. He said, all we ask is the chance to serve. Tonight, the British people have given us the chance to serve, and serve we will, with all our heart and all our mind. And to you, all of you that have come here this evening, I say thank you for all your work and for all your help. It's been a long journey for this party, has it not? It's been a long journey. I'm delighted that Neil Kinnock is here tonight as well. Neil took us back from the brink of extinction and helped make this party what it is today. And it is with real pride that we, all the people here, young and old from every part of the country, from every background, we say tonight, you, the British people, have given us the chance to serve you. You have put your trust in us, and we say to you, we shall repay that trust for you. We govern for you. Finally, all these years, we have been people saying but never given the chance to do. And yet the only purpose in being in politics is to do, to get things done, to make things happen. Now we have the chance to make things happen. And we take that responsibility upon us, and we say we shall discharge it, and we shall make this country as proud of us as tonight we are proud of them. Thank you very much indeed.
Tony Blair outside the festival hall on the South Bank, making a speech which he's made many times on the stump, slightly revamped for this victory moment. Not an emotional speech thanking all the party workers and supporters who've gathered there, but more a restatement of policy and intention with this huge majority. Sherry, his wife, Sherry Booth, the lawyer beside him, and an enthusiastic welcome from Labour Party workers and supporters who've come here in the early hours of the morning as the dawn breaks. Well, I don't know what you thought, Robin Oakley. I thought that was rather a slightly stilted way of dealing with a victory party. It's not at all what you'd expect, a sort of restatement of all the policy lines.
Well, I think Mr. Blair was very conscious that he was speaking to the nation outside, as well as to his own party workers.
Come on, pull the other one.
Assuming that they're all still watching us here, David, I'm sure he was conscious of that. But it's been... The whole Labour campaign has been one of careful reassurance. Remember that image that Roy Jenkins produced at the beginning of the campaign? There was Mr. Blair carrying this precious crystal vase along a long, slippery corridor. He's got there to the end of the corridor with the crystal vase, and he didn't even then dare to do a little pirouette with it still in his hands.
There's something a bit sort of tight-laced or uptight about the way that they handle ideas and handle the sort of expression of it.
We did see him once or twice, though, towards the end of the campaign, out on the stump, cutting loose and getting some more emotion into it. But they've been conscious themselves, I think, of how it has been a rather safety-first campaign. We suddenly got this colour purple creeping into Labour's advertisements and background and so on, and that was, they said, to symbolise the passion that was behind it all. But they've had to be so disciplined in order to get where they have, to create new Labour and to convince the public they have changed.
Well, certainly the crowd there is very exuberant as John Prescott, Tony Blair walked down being congratulated by the crowd. It's not until tomorrow morning, round about midday, that he goes to the palace to, in the formal expression, kiss hands with the Queen and take over as Prime Minister. Tony King.
I think one of the reasons that...
Just a second, we have the arrival of John Major down at Smith Square. And this is the headquarters of the Conservative Party. Party workers who've been busy planning and plotting their campaign and have faced a defeat on a really quite dramatic scale tonight. We expect Mr. Major to speak to the party workers here before going back for the last time to number 10. Meets Michael Portillo, who's been defeated tonight. Alan Duncan, who is one of his close supporters during the campaign. Sympathy for Mr. Major, who's always been rather admired by the people who come in contact with him in the party. Now we expect him to speak.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, above all, for all you've done in the last few weeks and the last few months. I know how hard so many of you have worked. I know how much you have sacrificed, given up, hoped, dreamed for a different result and a different outcome tonight. It hasn't proved that way. I don't think there was much that we left undone that we could have done. There are some times in politics when the ball just rolls in the opposite direction and there isn't a great deal that you can do about it. I don't think it is in our best interests to spend our time in the immediate future doing anything other than preparing for what lies ahead, not just in the short term, but in the medium term. Politics is a rough old trade. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But when you don't, you just step back, ask yourself why you didn't, and put yourself in a position to make sure that next time...
Yes.
Next time.
Tory telecom reforms.
That next time you get it right, and you do win. I've been in the Conservative Party for as long as I can remember. I guess many of the people in this room joined the Conservative Party as soon as they could as well. And we joined it for the same reasons. We didn't join it just for the nights when you win, just for the easy victories from time to time. We didn't join it for the office. We didn't join it for the spoils. We joined it because we care about what it stands for, and we care about what it can do for this country. Now, we have been in being as a party for longer than any other democratic party in Western Europe. We've won more elections. We've lost a few on the route. But we've won more elections and we have perhaps served in government longer, more often, and better in the interests of our country than any other democratic. And we will do so again. Tonight we have suffered a very bad defeat. Let us not pretend to ourselves it was anything other than what it was. Unless we accept it for what it was and look at it, we will be less able to put it right. We've lost some very good servants of the party, people who've devoted a huge amount of their life to the service of this country and the service of this party. We've lost, temporarily, I hope, some colleagues, both senior and not so senior, who still have a lot of service to give this country and this party, and who will, I hope, be back where they should be, in the House of Commons, serving us all. And they lost, from what I saw of it, with a dignity that made me as proud of this party as I have been of theirs. We now have a job to do, all of us.
It's those reforms again, John. It's those reforms again.
They tell me the technological age is a good thing. Forgive me if from time to time I just have a small leave to doubt whether that is absolutely entirely true. We'll have to regroup. We'll have to sit back. I hope everybody will go away, have a rest. You've earned it. Not for too long. And then we'll begin to work again. There's a job to do in opposition. To be in opposition in Parliament is a pretty honourable way of life. To make sure that the government of the day is kept under close scrutiny. We'll deal fairly. If they do what we think is right for our country, we'll support them. If they do what we think is wrong for our country, then we'll oppose them as vigorously as we can with every member we have and every party worker we have up and down the country. So I know tonight is not a night for cheers and champagne for us. It's a night, perhaps, to look back, I hope with some pride, at the changes that we have made to our country in the last 18 years. I first entered Parliament 18 years ago tomorrow, I think. And the difference in our country is a difference you could not express unless you remembered what it was like in May of 1979 when the Conservatives first came to government. Many people who voted in this general election perhaps never knew that, for they have never known anything in their adult lives but Conservative government. And others perhaps have not remembered precisely what it was like. Well, I said a moment ago that this party had served longer in government than any other. We've suffered great defeats before. We have always come back. We have always come back. And we have always come back because there is something in the Conservative philosophy and the Conservative instinct that runs absolutely with the grain of the British instinct. We must make sure we rediscover that, not just in the interests of our party, but in the interests of our country. So there is a great deal of work to do. I would just say three final things. Firstly, perhaps I can reiterate to this group here all these faces I've come to know so well, in some cases over many years, in some cases more recently. If you will forgive me repeating something I said a little earlier, and you may possibly have seen, I think perhaps here, of all places, is a good place to pay tribute to some of the people who have done so much to help over recent years. The party chairman, not here now, but on his way here, and I hope shortly here. Those of our colleagues whom we have lost, and on a more personal basis than I have temporarily mislaid her, Norma. So, right, okay, we lost. So we...
Go on, John.
So go away for the weekend, relax, fire yourself up again, and then come back Because when you come back at the beginning of next week, we've got a job, and we better start doing it then.
We'll win.
Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister at Smith Square, absolutely no sign of, or no indication rather, that he's thinking of stepping down, talking about getting on with a job of recovery as he goes up the stairs there where Mrs. Thatcher stood and said they were going to win the cities after the election in '87. So John Major making a speech thanking them all, saying quite frankly they'd lost, but as I say, no indication that he's thinking of standing down. We don't know what he'll do. Now, Peter, let's have a look at how this victory has been won by Labour, where it was won, how it was won, and the scale of it.
The job John Major has to do to win back the country is really quite dramatic, and it's even more frightening for the Tories when you look at details like this, for example. Mr. Blair's great pitch was to win Middle England. And look what he's done. In working class seats, 9% the swing was there, whereas in the middle class seats, in Middle England seats, suburban seats, the seats where all these vital marginal areas were, a 12%, a massive 12% swing. That's twice the biggest swing we've had by any part of the nation since the war, a 12% swing in those middle-class seats. Look also at the regional spread of the vote. Now, this is the lead in 1992, Labour's lead in Scotland, the North and Wales, a huge Tory lead in that fortress in the South, Midlands and London. Labour's never won a general election without winning a majority of the vote in London. Now look what's happened this time. Look how the lead has, of course, jumped in Scotland, the North and Wales, but in the Midlands, critical, Middle England, 12% lead for Labour. In London, an 18% lead for Labour. There are going to be 11 Conservative MPs left in London, all the 74 MPs. Only 1/7 of them will be Tories. In the south, that fortress of conservatism, that huge area all the way around and down Surrey, Sussex, right the way along, only a 9% Conservative lead left there. Now, let's just look at how this landscape has changed so dramatically for the Conservatives. Here are half all the seats in Britain were Conservative in 1992, represented here by their majorities, huge, great columns of blue, some of them very tall, some of them very small, like this one here. That represents a very tight seat in Brecon and Radnorshire, and that was one that was easy for the opposition to gain. But let's just shape these towers of blue regionally so that we can see them, where we've kept them at their proportions to show you what the majorities were. Here, for example, is Kensington and Chelsea, the safest seat of all in London. And now we'll have a look now at them region by region. We're going to go region by region now and just look at them. And we're going to start with Scotland over here. And here you see the effect of Labour's attack on Scotland. No MPs left for the Tories there at all. In the north, nobody left in the marginal seats down the bottom, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats making a huge assault on the Highlands up there. Here we have the Midlands and Wales, and very few of the foothills left, one or two of them there, but the opposition attack reaching right up into the higher parts there, London, and the same thing in the south. David, back to you.
Peter, let's go down to Falmouth and Camborne. Sebastian Coe there, the Olympic middle distance gold medal winner, and a mass of candidates that he attracted to this seat where his majority was 3,200 or so. There's Peter de Savary, standing for the referendum party, the millionaire or maybe billionaire, I don't know which.
Glitter, Gary, official monster raving loony party, 161. Holmes, Paul Thomas, Liberal, 527. Jones, Terry Lynn, Liberal Democrat, 13,512. Luorn, Ruth, Mebian Kerno, 238.
It's the Cornish Independence Party.
Robert Lee, UK Independence Party, 355. And that Candice Kathleen Atherton has been duly elected to serve as member for the Falmouth and Camborne constituency.
So the former mayor of Islington down there in Cornwall takes the seat, going from third place to top, and Sebastian Coe is defeated. His majority of 3,200 overturned by a majority of just under 3,000. Now, let's go back to you, Peter, because we were stopped halfway through.
Yeah, but we're just looking at these mountain tops of Conservative strength here. There's London with Kensington and Chelsea. I can't reach the top of Alan Clark's seat. He's just survived. As you can see, the opposition attack has gone right up here into the foothills, into the mountains, but not the very heights up there. There, by the way, I forgot to mention, we went past this Tatton, Martin Bell's success in the safest seat of all in the Tory North. And now we come finally across here to the south. This is the great stronghold of Toryism. What's Labour's and the Liberal Democrats' attack down there? There's the onslaught going right up through the foothills into the much safer seats, even gaining some of these heights up here, but not, of course, seats like Beaconsfield right up at the top here. And let's just now look at the whole new landscape of Britain and see how the colour has dramatically changed. The swings have been getting greater and greater as you move towards the south. That's why here in London you have this devastation of Tory strength in London. Only 11 seats left there for the Tories. Down here in the south, 90 seats left for the Tories, 53 down on where they were before. And so the new pattern of Britain, the new landscape of Britain, is very little blue left compared to what it was. And there you see the number of losses they've suffered right the way across all the regions. 178 losses probably altogether in this election, with one or two seats still to come. I'm not quite certain about that number. It looks like 178, the worst since 1900 or so. David.
Thanks, Peter. Jeremy Hanley, former chairman of the party, former Northern Ireland minister, defeated in Richmond Park by Jenny Tong, the Liberal Democrat. After many battles, the Liberal Democrats trying to take that seat. And this is how Jeremy Hanley responded to his defeat.
If more Conservatives were like John Major, if they'd fought as honourable a battle and put their country first, as John Major has done, in trying to recover this nation from the depths that it was in before, we would have done far better. If we had stuck together as a party, far better, and followed John Major's leadership, we would have done better.
Jeremy Hanley there. And now we go to Covent Garden early this morning, to the piazza, where Krishnan Gurumurthy has some people with him responding to this. No, the Covent Garden Market, it looks like, rather than the piazza.
That's
anyway,
right.
Krishnan.
Good morning, David. Well, they said New Labour, New Britain, so we came to New Covent Garden, where the people here were among the first to wake up to the end of Conservative rule. Morris, did you get what you wanted?
Yeah, I did actually, yes, I did.
And what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to an equal kind of attitude to the way the country is run. I believe the way the Tories have dominated over the last, 17 years, I think it's a good day for democracy. And me personally, on a personal issue, I've been to experience the national health system through illnesses and one thing and the other, and it's absolutely disgusting. On that issue alone, I've certainly gone towards Labour. I have voted Tory the election before last, but last one and this one's been Labour.
All right, well, David, do you share his view?
Not at all, no. Tory man through and through. Ted Heath, my local man. Thank goodness he got in. But Tony Blair says no income tax change, that's good. Don't change the VAT and look after the small businessman.
Well, Tim, what about you?
I go along with my brother there. I think that...
What do you think is really going to change? What's really going to be good about Britain under a Labour government?
Well, I think people going to be sort of better off with the education and with transport. I think they'll put a lot of money into transport, in the underground, British Rail. I think they should maybe nationalise that again.
Well, lots to look forward to, maybe. Yes. Gentlemen, thank you very much. David.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Krishnan. Jeremy.
David, well, I'm joined now by Stephen Dorrell, the Health Secretary. Stephen Dorrell, I don't know whether you heard the Prime Minister's speech at Central Office. He didn't sound like a man who wanted to go on, did he?
He was a man, I think, who was setting out clearly the priority which the Conservative Party now faces. And that's a priority to ensure that whenever Prime Minister Blair looks into his mirror, he sees a credible, attractive, alternative government looking over his shoulder. It's the task of the opposition to call the government to account and to present an alternative way of dealing with the nation's problems. That's the challenge that the Conservative Party now faces.
Under a new leader, presumably?
Well, I think the leadership question is frankly a secondary question.
Okay.
What's a primary question is the importance of the Conservative Party re-establishing the coalition of interest on the centre-right of politics, where I believe the majority view in Britain still rests.
Do you share the view of the Tory Reform Group that you were scuppered by the activities of the right wing?
I don't believe that the language that the Tory Reform Group used is in any way helpful at this stage in the developments. What I think we need to do is to sit down in a quiet and calm way to look at the lessons that are to be drawn from this general election campaign and ensure that we build a party that is true to its traditions as the longest established democratic political party anywhere in Europe.
But you're talking about sorting yourself out maybe late this year, early next, something like that?
I'm talking about starting on Monday morning, as John Major made clear in his speech in Central Office. This is a task the moment one election is over, whether you win it or lose it. A democratic political party ought to be then thinking about the way forward, its objectives, what it stands for, what it means to argue for, and how it means to deliver them.
Mr. Dorrell, thank you very much.
The time to start that is next week.
Mr. Dorrell, thank you.
Let's catch up on what's been going on in Scotland and have a summary of the news from there with Jane Frankie. Jane.
Thanks, David. Well, in effect, as Sir David Steele said earlier, the Scottish Liberal Democrats are the opposition party in Scotland tonight. They have 9 seats. The Scottish National Party have 6. Labour have 56. The Tories have lost all theirs. Even the jubilant Shadow Scottish Secretary George Robertson acknowledged that they couldn't believe it when they saw all the Tory seats and their high-profile incumbents fall as they did like ninepins. It means, presumably, that English MPs will make up the front bench on the opposition benches during Scottish questions on the Scottish Grand Committee. An extraordinary situation. The Scottish nationalists, while doubling their seat total, really didn't make any breakthrough into the Labour stronghold that they were trying to do, although their big scalp of the night, of course, was Ian Lang, the President of the Board of Trade. But our new Labour MPs do include some pioneers. Mohammed Sarwar, who won Glasgow Govan, will be the first Muslim MP in Parliament, and Anne Begg, who won Aberdeen South, will be the first wheelchair-bound Member of Parliament. There's 1 seat left to declare up here tonight. It's almost certain to stay with the Liberal Democrats, but the main story north of the border is that for the first time since 1832, Scotland has no Tory MPs.
Thanks very much, Jane. Well, let's just have a final reminder this morning of how things stand. This is the state of the parties. We've still got 35 results to come in, but at the moment, with 624 declared, Labour is on 416, up 145, well over that 330 they needed to have a majority in the new House of Commons. The Conservatives way down on 157, minus 174. 174 net losses. The Liberal Democrats on 40, and the Nationalists on 3, others on 1. Based on those 624 results we've had in so far, a Labour majority of 179 is predicted, the biggest ever and the largest swing that Labour's had since 1945 in the tail end of the Second World War. The lowest Conservative number of seats now since 1906, and the party facing wipeout in Scotland and Wales. For the Liberal Democrats, they're heading for the highest number of seats for a third party since 1929. They've had a good night in terms of the seats they've had. And here are the highlights of the night and the declarations and the stories of success and defeat that we've heard. Well, the end of a most dramatic night in British politics, which has seen the virtual wipeout of the Tory party in Britain. Tony Blair going with a huge majority to the palace tomorrow to become Prime Minister. Join us at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and we'll have all the news then. From all of us here, good night.
For 1 week only, we're offering you two Match of the Days for one. We asked 3 ordinary people what they thought.
We'll continue our live simulcast of the BBC's election coverage later at 4 a.m. Eastern Time, 1 Pacific.
Really not impressed.
Now some weekend programming information.
That's better. And what about new added Motson?
His ability to pick up players was terrific today.
This is Christopher Buckley's 6th book, and he says he had a hard time coming up with titles for all of them. This weekend, he'll fill us in on how a collection of his magazine articles ended up with the title Rye Martinis. Forbes FYI magazine editor Christopher Buckley on Book Notes.
The roots of the San Antonio Express News go back to 1865 in San Antonio, when it was the Express and the News, 2 separate papers that weren't actually combined until the 1970s. And 1860 is a long time ago, 1865 in Texas, because this was still a very unsettled area. The hill country still had Native Americans in it. There were still Indian depredations. We're 3 hours from Mexico. The war with Mexico had only ended in 1836. The Alamo, famous Battle of the Alamo, which is 2 blocks here from the newspaper, was in 1836. Texas was a republic until the 1840s, so this was very early in the city and state's history when the newspapers first started publishing here, and I think you get a sense of that history visiting it. This is an interesting time at the Express News because Hearst Corporation, which is a privately held diversified media company based in New York City, have owned the Express News for 4 years. Before that, it was a property of Rupert Murdoch's News Corps, and people may not realize this, but the Express and News, which Rupert combined in the 1970s when he bought them, this was his first property outside of Australia. This is where he gained his toehold in the United States, long before there was a Fox network or even before he owned the New York Post. This is where he came, and a lot of people say it's because his financial advisors or his front guys found San Antonio and South Texas in general to be an awful lot like Australia, and they thought that a Murdoch-style newspaper would go well here. And they were right. I think we're a very important institution in the community, both as a business and as a public trust. As a business, you know, we're providing direct employment to more than 1,100 families in the city. That's not insignificant. We're a major tenant of downtown. You've seen the millions of dollars that Hearst is at, the tens of millions of dollars that we've invested in this newspaper downtown. Most American newspapers haven't stayed in the center cities with their printing presses anymore. We did it as a statement of support for San Antonio, particularly because of its ethnic diversity here. And if we had moved way out north, we would have isolated ourselves from a very important part of the population. And we do something else that I think is pretty unusual, and that is that we open our news meeting every afternoon to the public. The news meeting is one of the most cherished, guarded little secret enclaves in American newspaper journalism, and I've worked in several newsrooms where the publisher wasn't even allowed in, or, God forbid, people from advertising and marketing who might come in there and sow their bad ideas on the editors. We not only welcome all of our colleagues from around the business, the newspaper itself, and they're almost always someone from somewhere else, but you'll see community leaders come in all the time to attend, clergy, school teachers, principals, people that are from business and are curious. We think it's a great way to disarm people about their anti-media attitudes, because they come in and see that it's organized chaos and that we've got to produce this single paper every single day from scratch. And it sort of, it brushes away the notions that there's a conspiracy out there, or that, you know, we're just a bunch of, you know, liberal jugheads trying to put it to people.
Tomorrow, one of the C-SPAN school buses visits South Sioux City, Nebraska. Our other bus stops in Wells, Maine.
I'm Lee Javins, Education Relations Manager for Suburban Cable TV. We're at Norristown Area High School, just a few miles from Valley Forge National Historical Park. We're very proud to serve over 96,000 customers in the Pottstown, Pennsylvania area.
The adventure began in 1831. French aristocrat Alexis de Tocqueville sailed to America. What he saw, heard, and learned became the book Democracy in America, a work still quoted today. The Alexis de Tocqueville Tour, your chance to explore democracy in America, begins May 9th on C-SPAN. And here's tonight's lineup. In a moment, a look at the budget negotiations from Capitol Hill. We'll hear from Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott, a group of moderate and conservative Democrats known as the Blue Dogs, and House Appropriations Committee Ranking Member David Obey, House Minority Whip David Bonnier, and others. Just past 3, President Clinton's remarks at the Democratic National Committee's annual dinner from earlier tonight, followed by Whitewater Independent Counsel Kenneth Starr. Then we'll resume our coverage of the British elections '97 when we continue our simulcast from the BBC. That's at 4 a.m. Eastern. Here's a look at the budget negotiations. We begin with Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott, who talked briefly with reporters at about 4 p.m. Eastern Time about the developments.
Well, as I promised earlier, I wanted to come down and give you a report. We're still working on some details on a prospective budget agreement. We are hoping to be able to go over the details of what we've been discussing with senators in the next couple of hours. And we hope maybe we can reach an agreement before the day's out, but we are not there now. I'd be glad to respond to a couple of questions.
What are the problems right now? What are the details?
Well, a lot of it is trying to clarify, exactly what we're agreeing to. We think we know what we want to do on tax cuts, but we got to make sure we understand what goes within the number that we're discussing. The White House obviously would like to have some understanding in their areas in terms of education. We've